Welcome to 1000 Days Sober Trigger Clinic. My name is Lee Davey. I am not an alcoholic. I refuse to be anonymous. I am someone that doesn't drink alcohol, and I spend every waking moment of my life helping other people do the same. Like right now, ladies and gentlemen. Booyah! It's a wonderful, beautiful Friday out there. It's movie night in the Davey household, which means we're going to be probably watching Frozen again for like the 150th time. But before I get there, we're going to be talking about the transference trigger. Let me have a little drink first. What is transference? Well, I first learned of this word, this terminology, actually, when I first got into a relationship with my current beautiful wife, Liza. So for those of you that don't know, just taking my socks off because I like to do this in tree pose for some reason. What some of you will know, some of you won't know, is before I met Liza, I was in a 20 plus year relationship with somebody else. So I actually was married for 15 years of that, and came out of that relationship, had a period of time alone before I went into a relationship with Liza, and me and Liza eventually got married, right? So how transference showed up was quite bizarre for me, and it was a phenomenon that I just wasn't even aware of until it happened, is I would start to get angry and annoyed at Liza for things that she hadn't even done. So what was happening was I was still locked into my old relationship, and because my ex-wife used to behave in certain ways that used to trigger me, I didn't have a separation between my ex-wife and my new partner. So when my new partner would trigger me in the similar way that my old partner does, I would forget that I changed relationships, and that I would literally blame Liza for behaving in this way, like, and say to her, like, I'm fed up that you're always doing this. And she'd be like, this is the first time I've ever done it. Well, of course she's telling the truth. The story, and we all have these stories, don't we, that really bother us, that and these histories that bother us and turn up into conflicts. It wasn't the story and the history. It didn't belong to me and Liza. It belonged to me in a different relationship. So think about how unfair that is. It's like you're transferring all that emotional baggage, all those stories, all that history onto a completely different person. And you're, in my case, deflecting your shame from a previous relationship onto this new person in your new relationship. That's how I see transference anyway. Let me turn this light down a little bit. It's kind of blasting me in the eyes. Hi Tams, good to see you on here. Let's go with that one. That's a little bit better. It's gorgeous here in Toronto, Ontario. I'm happy to be here today because I really need a drink. No, you don't, Tams. You don't need a drink. Just think about it. Just go and get yourself a decaf coffee or a juice or something. You don't need a drink, Tams, because you are perfectly whole and complete just the way you are. And your body is designed to handle any shit that the world throws at you, okay? That said, being on here when you're triggered, listening to someone talk about triggers, is a fucking pretty smart thing to do. So welcome here, Tams, okay? So I think if this is your first time coming here, Tams, I'll just give you a brief explanation of what we're going to do. I'm going to describe a trigger. So in our wonderful support community, Strive, which is available if you take the Strive Method for Addictions workshop, we have an area called the trigger section, and we ask strivers to answer 11 questions in the trigger section so we can then help them, and they can help themselves understand at a deeper level what is really going on and what is driving us to drink alcohol, okay? And it's good that you have that herbal tea in front of you, Tams. That's all you need, okay? So I'm going to describe this trigger. The person that I'm going through this trigger with wants to be anonymous. So I'm going to call her Victoria. I'll probably forget. Victoria. And I'm going to call her boyfriend David. Let's go Beckhams. Let's go full on Beckhams, right? So here's Victoria's trigger in brief. So the first thing we ask people to do, just describe your trigger in brief. Okay, so Victoria says, something that my boyfriend said took me straight back to my previous relationship where my ex was emotionally dominant and controlling. I felt history was repeating itself. Something that my boyfriend said took me straight back to my previous relationship where my ex was emotionally dominant and controlling. I felt history was repeating itself, says Victoria. She says they had made plans to go to an expensive restaurant with friends. And at the last minute, the boyfriend checked the menu and said, I'm freaked out. Like, I can't go. So think about it, right? So Victoria's all dressed up. She's really looking forward to going out. It's a really important moment for her. She's actually going out with her sister and her husband. So like really important moment for her. And she's got really excited for it all week. And at the last minute, as she's dressed to the nines, and she doesn't get dressed up that often, David looks at the menu and says, I can't go out. I can't do this. She's like, what the fuck? Right? He's like, it's too expensive. And then he says, fuck it. We'll just go and I'll just put it on my credit card and it'll take me a million years to pay off. Right? So he shifts into martyr energy. And that triggered her because that type of behavior, that almost like, don't go to the restaurant, stay at home with me because I feel like I need to be at home. That kind of like controlling behavior used to happen in a previous relationship. All right. So that was why it triggered her. What time was it? It was 5:30. What day was it? On a Tuesday. Like I always say, it's really important to record your times and your days so you can find patterns. But this is not a pattern. Okay. I always say that triggers fall down into two sections. One of them is what I call an anchor trigger. So a good example of an anchor trigger is I've just had sex and I'm going to have a cigarette. Okay, so there's nothing emotional about it. You've just had sex and you have a cigarette because that's what you do. It's like an anchor habit or an anchor trigger. And then there's another trigger that's just completely and utterly driven by emotion and hyper arousal. Okay, so this is what happened in this case. All right, something that you can still plan for sure, because you'll know what things hyper arouse you. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. What was I doing before the trigger? Really important question, because very often, as we know, sometimes triggers could be, they could be hitting us for a week before we eventually succumb to them. We could be thinking that we could be in a cake shop on Friday, look at this beautiful cake, start thinking, oh, it's such a shame that I can't eat sugar. And then that's bugging you all week until the following Friday, you just end up pigging out somewhere else because that trigger's been in your mind. So it's really important to identify what you was doing before you actually succumb. So in this case, Victoria says she was getting ready to go out for dinner with the sister and her husband. Who was I with? Really important. In this instance, she was with David, her boyfriend, right? Why is it important to figure out who we're with? Very often in triggers, whilst we have to always take 100% responsibility for what's going on in our life and our decision to drink and the trigger in general, we will find very often that part of the puzzle is that we're in the midst of toxic people and we're in the midst of a toxic environment. Okay, and we need to recognize that and either remove the toxicity from the equation, or we get out of that environment, or we get away from those people. Okay, so a good example is last week when I was talking through my anger trigger around my daughter. I said that my daughter in that situation was toxic. It was like she was a toxic person to me. I don't mean that my 4-year-old daughter is toxic. I just mean in that moment it's toxic to my situation, and I can either get away from her or I can remove the toxicity. So that is what I did by looking at her and going, she is a beautiful human being who really doesn't understand how to communicate, and that is why she's screaming and shouting right now, and then have deep empathy with that. That removes the toxicity, as an example. Another way of removing that toxicity is just getting up and leaving the room, right? So you're leaving the toxic environment, you're leaving the toxic person, which in this case is my 4-year-old because she's fucking screaming in my ear, and I just get out of the room and I can deal with my trigger in a more composed sense, right? So who you're with, really important. You can identify trends. A lot of us, when we're stuck in the addictive state, we drink in the same places, we smoke in the same places, we do our drugs in the same places. We drink with the same people. We smoke with the same people. We do our drugs with the same people, right? So who we're with and where we are is really important. How was I feeling emotionally? Another really important question. So Victoria says, I was feeling in a good mood, really upbeat and looking forward to the dinner. She said that her sister was moving overseas soon, so she was really making the most of the time together. We were going to a nice upmarket restaurant, so she was really looking forward to the delicious food. So here she is, really on the top of it, right? I know as well, because I had a conversation with her behind the scenes, that she got really dressed up, and she liked that because, you know, that is something that she doesn't do that often. And she's really looking forward to seeing her sister. She knows this time is really precious because she's going somewhere, and she's really looking forward to eating in a swanky restaurant. Like, who doesn't like to eat good food, right? So that's where she is in her emotional state. And then she says that this is how it changed. After David's comments, she felt small, controlled, and emotionally hijacked. All right, she felt small, controlled, and emotionally hijacked. And this resulted in her feeling angry. And then she kind of pressed the self-destruct button. So let's follow this through. She's feeling really good. She's feeling happy. She's feeling joyful. She's going to go out. She's going to have a good laugh. She's going to have some good food. She's really looking forward to it. She's happy. She's joyful. And then her boyfriend like says, well, I can't go. It's too expensive. And she's like, what the fuck? Because think about it. She's now got to tell her sister, and she's now got to tell her husband that her boyfriend's not going to be there. And not only is she going to have to do that, she's going to have to lie. Because her boyfriend is not going to want her to say, I'm sorry, my boyfriend's not coming because he can't afford it. And I'll tell you why in a minute. He definitely won't want her to say that. So she's going to have to lie. So those things are going to be going through her head in milliseconds. Okay? But then he turns around and says, oh, do you know what? We'll go anyway, and I'll put it on my credit card. Now he's transferring guilt and shame onto Victoria. Like he's becoming a martyr. Yeah, I'll come, but I can't afford it. And I just want you to know that I can't afford it, but I'm coming just for you. Like, there's a lot of subconscious transference here of shame and guilt coming from David onto Victoria. And all of a sudden, Victoria's mood just drops. She gets really angry. She's feeling small. She's feeling controlled, emotionally. And she's thinking, this has happened again. Oh no, not again. And now she's thinking her two relationships have merged into one. And now she's thinking about her ex doing the same thing. And how did she used to deal with that? Drinking alcohol to numb and to get away from it. And now she's doing the same thing, right? So important thing to note there, right? And so far, everything seems to me pretty normal, right? It seems pretty normal. And I'll explain why in a minute. Because understanding the normality of relationships is really important, because if we set our expectations above normality, then we're setting ourselves up for a failure. And very often when we feel stressed and anxious and fearful, it's because an expectation isn't met. So if we lower those expectations, then we're less likely to have a really hyper aroused state in any of those key emotions. Okay. We also then ask the question, what perceived value do we believe that Victoria think she was going to have when she drank alcohol? So, you know, she's fucked off. She's angry with David. She's really pissed off. But what is alcohol going to do, right? Why drink alcohol? So Victoria says, I actually knew it wouldn't provide any value. That it wouldn't provide any value. Okay, so if Victoria was here now, like, I would definitely challenge her to have a deeper reflection on that. Okay, I knew it wouldn't provide any value. We're not going to do anything unless it provides us with value. So whenever we're faced with the value question, if you're listening to this, folks, if you're ever triggered to drink or smoke or take drugs or sleep with a prostitute or whatever it is that is your thing, okay, whenever you're triggered to do those things, it's because there is an apparent value that's just risen in your mind, an itch that you need to scratch. If you do drink or smoke or gamble or watch pornography or whatever your thing is, same thing. You did it because there was some value in it. Right. Our job at 1000 Days Sober and Strive is to eliminate that value. Either remove it or reduce the intensity, the amplification of that value, and to amplify something else that you could do that has greater value. So you diminish the value that alcohol has or remove it altogether, and you heighten the value of something else that can replace that in that moment. Okay? But to say it doesn't have any value, that is a defense mechanism. It's like, hey, I know what's going on here. I got my shit together, but where the more truthful answer is, I actually fucking don't have my shit together. And that's okay. Okay, so I knew it wouldn't provide any value. I would really, if you're listening to this, Victoria, I know you will be, reflect on that, please. And then you actually answer your own question. You actually, I'm asking you to reflect, but you actually go into it. So you say, I knew it wouldn't provide any value, but I was in a fuck you state of mind. I wanted to stop how I was feeling. I wanted to numb everything. Alcohol has always been my escape in the past too. So there's your value, right? There's your value. Your value is you wanted to get out of it because you didn't want to feel your feelings. Okay? That is value. So in the short term, alcohol provides you with value because if you drink it, you don't have to deal with all this anger and frustration and annoyance that you have with David, right? So it provides you with value, okay? And that's okay, all right? What I want you to do, though, and I invite you to do, is categorize this value as short-term instant gratification feeling. So right now, if I drink, it will numb my feelings and emotions and I won't have to deal with the situation. Boom, it works. All right. For strivers, what I want you to do is I want you to stop thinking in short-term instant gratification ways. Okay? And I invite you to switch the lens and look at long-term value. So if we switch the lens and we look at this instance through the lens of long-term value, there isn't any. Think about it. If we keep having these situations of transference with David, and we keep drinking alcohol to numb our emotions so we don't have to deal with it, then what's going to happen? We're going to continually have instances of transference. And everything that happens underneath that around trust and security, and the most important thing, a complete and utter lack of understanding about how the person you likely are going to spend the rest of your life with operates and what he's thinking under the hood or what she's thinking under the hood. We're not even going to go there because we've numbed through alcohol. Like, think about it. If we want to stop these feelings of transference, if we want to feel more connected to our partner, if we want to reduce instances where our miscommunication here is hitting us right at the last minute, then we have to work on that shit, right? We have to go through the pain and suffering of building our relationships. It's what I call like rupture and repair. So every time in our relationships, we're always going to have ruptures. I had one this morning with Liza, okay? But then you need a repair. I had one this morning with Liza. Now, if you don't repair your ruptures, and one way of not repairing them is to ignore them by drinking alcohol, then those ruptures are going to become septic. And eventually, they're going to become toxic. And you're going to have to amputate something in your relationship, and that like leads to divorce, right? So it's really important that we understand that whilst we may think we're doing the right thing in the moment by blocking off our emotions, we're not. The emotions are being activated because it's our mind's way of telling us we need to deal with some shit. So David says, I ain't going to the restaurant. I can't believe how expensive it is. Victoria gets really triggered and angry. That anger is telling her that this is a situation you need to deal with. That you need to sit down with David at some point and say, hey, when you said XYZ, I felt XYZ. Right? And I love you dearly, but I really want to kind of get to the bottom of what is going on as a team. because I don't want to feel like that. And I imagine you don't want me to feel like that. And I don't want you to feel any other way than happy, joyful, blah, 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 right? So there needs to be a conversation, and the trigger point of the conversation is uncomfortableness, is an emotional trigger that says you need to deal with this stuff, right? Okay. So on the value for some more things, there's another piece of value here that that I want to draw people's attention to that Victoria didn't write in her initial trigger, but I sense it going through her notes that she sent to me afterwards. There's another piece of value here, if you think about it. If your partner knows that you are trying to be someone that doesn't drink alcohol, and they know that you're really putting a lot of time and effort into that, including in Victoria's case, paying financially for a subscription to Strive to do that, right? And to put in the physical time that she has to do to write this trigger out and stuff. Like, if your partner knows that you're going through that and how much that means to you, then what happens if you drink alcohol? What signal is that sending to your partner, right? What signal is it sending? It's a big SOS, right? It's like, holy shit, this guy doesn't see me. This guy doesn't understand how his behavior has just affected me. He hasn't got a fucking clue. So do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get myself shit-faced. Because if I get myself shit-faced, he'll fucking notice what he's done. He'll feel my pain. He will hurt because he can see I'm hurting. I want to hurt him, so I'm going to drink alcohol, okay? That could be going on. And if that goes on, and I see this a lot in people, if that goes on, this fuck it, I'm going to drink, the fuck it. What does the fuck it mean? It means fuck you. I'm going to drink so you notice I'm in pain. That is like 100% victim energy. I am a victim, and I want you to know that I'm a victim. Victim energy is scarcity. It's lack. It's negative. It's low vibration. Everything that resistance wants for us to drink alcohol. Okay? What I want us to do is I want us to get out of that victim mentality. Because if you get in a victim mentality in this situation, so Victoria is very definitely in victim mentality here, right? Now what happens because she's in victim mentality is she's now making David the villain. And by making David the villain, it's really building up so much toxic emotion that's leading her to drink. Because she's looking at him as a villain. I'm going to propose something different in a bit, but she's looking at him as a villain. Okay? When she drinks, he recognizes suddenly that he's been playing the villain role. So he now turns into a victim. He now thinks he's the victim. Oh no, what have I done? What have I done? Like, he's now the victim. Okay? And now he could easily make her the villain by going, oh my God, like, I can't believe that she's decided to drink. Now she's going to fucking blame me later on over that. And that's not my fault. That's her fault. That's not my doing, etc., etc. So you end up in this dynamic of, like, blaming each other and jumping in these roles of villain and victim. And the way to do that is to get out of it and say, whoa, where am I right now? What role am I playing? Am I the hero here? Am I the villain here? Am I the victim? And what's going to happen if I play these roles? Okay? So if I'm being a victim, do I want to be a victim? Who wants to be a victim, right? So what Victoria could say to herself is, if she's aware of this, which she will be after she watches this, and she does further work on it, is she says, okay, I'm really angry right now. I'm so drifting into victim energy, and I am making David out to be the villain. I don't want to be a victim. Okay? I need to show up right now. I need to be vulnerable now. I need to be brave and courageous right now. I need to stop looking in the mirror at my dress, and I need to sit down, hold David's hand, and have a good chat with him. With the right body language, with the right tone, okay, to understand what's going on with this guy. Because there's something going on with this guy. Okay? So now you're not a victim. You're thinking about this guy. You're thinking more empathically, what is going on with him? Why all of a sudden is this a big deal for him? How is he hurting? How is he feeling? Completely different energy to how we're feeling, right? Okay? Just check my notes here. Okay. So what I just wrote here is, what I'm talking about here really is relational literacy, understanding how each other communicates, so we can have greater awareness about what the heck is going on, and then we can communicate with them on a more effective level. And this is the reason why when I created the Strive method for addictions, I thought to myself, I need something more here. So I created the Strive method for relationships. Because if at the heart of all our addiction issues is shame that's attached to our relationships, either our relationships with ourselves or our relationships with other people. And most of us haven't got a fucking clue how to relate to ourselves or relate to other people. And even when we do get a clue and start to get better, like, you know, I think I'm in a really good spot when it comes to relational literacy. Still blew up and had a row with my wife this morning, right? Those things are going to happen. Rupture and repair is part of everyday normal human condition, normal everyday relationships. It shows that you're in a resilient relationship if you have a good system of rupture repair, right? But there needs to be a high level of relational literacy, and we need to be able to defeat the shame cycle that's going on in these relationships, and that means we need to be vulnerable and to talk about it, okay? The next question we have, by the way, throw any questions you have in the chat anytime, folks, okay? How could the perceived value be delusional? So Victoria here, first of all, she said there was no value, but then she did say there was some value, right? Like, I'm going to numb myself out and get away from my anger and all this kind of stuff. So we then asked strivers, well, can you think about this a little bit differently? And how could your value be wrong? How could it be kind of delusional thinking? Okay. And what Victoria's written here is, well, it did numb everything, right? So she's not saying this is delusional because she did want to numb everything. So it did. But this is the most important thing. It didn't just numb her emotions, and it didn't just numb out David's actions. It also numbed out her enjoyment of the night. Think about it. Alcohol is not that specific. It doesn't, when you drink alcohol, it doesn't numb out all the bad things and keep all the good things. It numbs everything out. Everything. And this is why the value of drinking alcohol to numb your feelings, or the drinking of alcohol to just blot out like an evening because you just had a fight, it takes away all the good stuff as well. All right? So it's really great that Victoria is aware of that and self-aware. She says, I didn't have a ridiculous amount to drink. We shared some wine and had a liqueur. It was still enough to have a terrible effect on me today. I woke in the early hours of this morning with crippling anxiety. I could feel it physically in my chest. I also had dark thoughts, something that I hadn't had in a long time. Now, there's just something that I haven't spoken to Victoria about. And again, I invite her to, because I know she'll be watching, I invite her to reflect on this and then reach out to me privately, is think about what's going on here, right? So in terms of this short-term instant gratification, so she said there's value here because I'm going to numb. But then if you look at this in a little bit deeper, you realize that actually this was not worth it. This was not worth the trade-off of numbing your emotions is not worth it here, because she's spoiled a really good night. Okay? And then there's the after effects of that come after, like feeling guilty, waking in the morning with crippling anxiety, having dark thoughts, physical pains, you know? Like, we need to be aware of that and understand of that and accentuate that. But here's the thing that I really want to focus on here, Victoria, and have a think about this. I didn't have a ridiculous amount to drink. We shared wine and had a liqueur. Now, if I was going out with my sister and her husband, and I had a fight with Liza, and then we went out, and I had a case of the fuck it's, and shared wine and had a liqueur, it would just be very difficult for that to happen. You see, I lost my train of thought there, because it would be very difficult for that to happen, because the understanding of how important it is to me that I don't drink and that drinking is not a part of my life will be shared with those who I love. So there will be a reaction what the fuck are you doing? What are you drinking for? So what I want to know, Victoria, is, was there this reaction? Did your sister and her husband, did David, did they say, what is going on? Like, how, you can't drink, you don't drink. We need to stop this evening right now because there's something wrong here. Think about, you're a heroin addict. You're a heroin addict and you go out for dinner and everybody knows you're in recovery. And then you just blurt out at the table, I'm just going to the toilet to shoot up. Who is going to say, yeah, okay, off you go? It ain't going to happen. They're going to be like, what the fuck? Not what the fuck she wants to shoot up, but what the fuck has happened to her to put her in that state to want to do this. This is where our support system is really important. Like, if I ever drink alcohol, I want my wife and everyone around me physically restraining me and saying, Lee, you don't want to do this. This is not you. Your goal is to be someone that doesn't drink alcohol. You help other people in the world to do the same. You cannot do this. Like what the fuck? Like, I want World War III to kick off when people protecting me. Like, is this happening here? Did it happen here, Victoria? Because if it didn't, why not? Why not? That is a really, really important reflection. Do they understand how important this is to you? Have we explained how important this is to you? How important is this to you? Do they understand how to support you when shit like this happens? Because shit like this is going to happen, and this is where our friends come into their own. This is why we have friends, so they can support us when we need them to. But do they know how to support us? Have we told them? If we haven't told them, why? If we have, why haven't they helped us? There's so much here, Victoria, that you can dive into in terms of like coming out, right? Which is an assignment in the ready phase of the Stride method for addictions. We need to be coming out to people, because if we're not, shit like this is going to happen and we're not going to get people's support. Okay. The next thing that Victoria says on the perceived value being a delusion, there was no reason for me to be anxious, she says. I hadn't done or said anything bad due to drinking. It's just the physical effect alcohol has on me. That's my main reason to stop. So I'm going to say that again. So let me put it all together. So Victoria says, how could the perceived value be a delusion? Well, it did numb everything, she says, even my enjoyment of the night. I didn't have a ridiculous amount of drink. We shared wine and had a liqueur. But it was still enough to have a terrible effect on me today, the day after. I woke in the early hours of the morning with crippling anxiety. I could feel it physically in my chest. I also had dark thoughts, something I hadn't had in a long time. But there was no reason for me to be anxious, she says. I hadn't done or said anything bad due to drinking. So the anxiety is just the physical effects alcohol has on me. And this is the main reason for stopping. Okay? Right. I want you listening to this now to think, what is going on here? What do you think is going on here? Type in the comments, right? So what seems to be happening is Victoria's framing the conversation as in, it's really bad for me to drink wine and liqueur. I shouldn't have done that. But luckily, I didn't do anything stupid. I didn't stand up on a table and show everyone my knickers. I didn't stumble and fall over and break my neck. I didn't smash my iPhone. I didn't call David a cunt. I didn't, spoil my sister's evening. So where does this anxiety come from? It must just be the alcohol. Well, must and. Okay? So, yes, there is going to be a crippling amount of anxiety if you are really serious about the vow of being someone that doesn't drink alcohol and you know you've let yourself down. Right? You know you've slipped out of alignment of integrity and you haven't rolled out your trigger toolkit, or you don't have a trigger toolkit and you haven't used it. You haven't done the things that you've said to yourself that you'll do to stop you drinking. If indeed you've even said and done that. Right? So, Victoria is a member of the Strive support team, but she's not doing the Strive method for addictions workshop. So I don't know where she is in terms of her vow and her declaration around being someone that doesn't drink alcohol. So I want to go there because it's really important. The first two phases of the Strive method for addiction, stuck and thought, we're not asking anybody to give up drinking because you're figuring out what's going on. Why am I stuck in this addictive cycle and why can't I give up? It's only until you get through that you say, yeah, I want to go 1,000 days sober, that we start to go through the ready phase, which means taking your vow that you're never going to drink alcohol again. And before you do, if it happens, in terms of relapse, I'm going to do these 5 or 6 things before I do it, which is your trigger toolkit, or what we call artillery, right? So I don't know where Victoria is on this journey in terms of her vows and her declarations and how she's stepped out of integrity. It might just be that she's been like, like, I really want to stop drinking, but I'm okay if I do drink. Or it could be like, I really want to stop drinking and I'm super, super anxious now because I broke my vow, which seems like likely the case, right? But here's the biggest issue around anxiety for me is the transference, is the root cause of the drinking here, right? So we had a drink because David spouted out about something, but the reason he spouted out about something and how it triggered transference and thoughts of control in a previous relationship, that is the root cause of why we're drinking. So the anxiety surely has to be a significant part, I would say, of he fucking let me down last night. And because he let me down, it took me back to a previous relationship that I had, that I felt controlled, that I felt small, that now I can look back and say, oh, thank goodness I'm not in that relationship. So when we're saying, thank goodness I'm not in that relationship, what does that mean about this relationship? So now we start thinking lightly, subconsciously, if not consciously, is this the right guy? Does this guy respect me? Is this guy going to control me? Is this guy going to make me small? Am I ever going to be able to get hold of this? Are all guys like this? Fuck all guys. There's going to be something going on, Victoria, in your head, and I invite you to talk more about this on Strive. Where was the anxiety here subconsciously around David's behavior and transference and how you're thinking about that? Because that's why we drank. Oh fuck, this guy's trying to control me. I don't want to be controlled. I hate the way it makes me feel. I'm so small. I allow it to happen. Fuck, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with this? How do I drink? Okay, so the root cause here is somewhere around and mixed in with that kind of transference issue. And this is where, if Victoria was doing the Strive methods for addictions workshop, she would have access to all our coaches, and I would be saying to her, you need to book a session with Liza Dinhofer. So Liza Dinhofer is our 1000 days sober coach. She is a thanatologist. She's a grief expert. And Liza would help Victoria go back to a previous relationship and fix up, shore up the leaks in terms of control, in terms of that relationship, in terms of how she felt about it, in terms of transfers. So then she can now go back into this relationship without that one transferring into this. Okay, in a way, why would I suggest that Victoria goes to a grief specialist? Maybe there's some grieving or something to do to say, okay, I need to bury this relationship and my emotions to it and then move on into my new one. Okay. If it's not, and it's just trauma related, which Liza can deal with anyway, we also have a trauma specialist in Vinny. So then it would be, okay, see Liza, see Vinny. Okay. Each person who does a Strive method for addictions, they have 2 sessions a month with our 1000 day sober coaching team. Okay. So then after going through the value and the perceived value, we ask the question, what could Victoria have done differently? This is where we're asking strivers to take personal responsibility and start mining for their own gold and understanding themselves what they could do. So it's good to have support coaches. It's good to have sobriety coaches, but really we need to step into our power and we need to fix this and own this, right? And what I could do differently, I'm going to talk about this for 15 to 20 minutes and then we'll call it a time, okay? So what Victoria says here is, I should have taken a deep breath. Now, a deep breath is good. It is a good artillery to deal with short-term triggers. Okay? It's a good weapon to have in your toolkit. But I wouldn't just take a deep breath. I would instill a form of breathing practice that you do when you're triggered. So in this case, David says something shitty. Victoria gets triggered to drink alcohol. She leaves and goes straight into the bathroom, and she knows for the next 5 minutes, she has to go through whatever her breathing routine is. but it needs to be more than, okay, I need to deal with this now, because we need to change states. And breath work is a really good way of changing states, but it's just not going to cut it. So we play around with it until we get something that works. Okay, so I should have taken a deep breath. Really good insight, but what I would prefer here is I should have gone into my breathing routine. I actually prefer I should have used my trigger toolkit. So not even thinking about what I should do, because we know what our trigger toolkit is. Like every time I feel triggered to drink, I got to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We know it off by heart. And then when it says, what could I do differently? I could have done my trigger toolkit, which allows a coach to say, why didn't you use your trigger toolkit? But at least let's have one in the beginning. Let's prepare for this, because we know we're going to be triggered. I should have taken a deep breath, says Victoria. I shouldn't have reacted as I did straight away to his comments. I shouldn't have reacted as I did straight away to his comments. That's going to be really difficult to change. And again, we need to lower our expectations a little bit here and understand that when we get in a hyper aroused state, that the way that the mind operates is really important to understand. So 98% of how we behave on a regular basis is automated. We don't think about it. All right? We don't think about it. So this morning when Liza touched my button, I reacted by getting angry. Okay? I reacted by getting angry. Now I could say I shouldn't have reacted angrily, but I think what is more important and in line with expectations is something more along the lines of, when I got angry, I should have realized my anger was controlling the situation, and I should have removed myself from the environment and the person and done my breathing. Okay? So we're not beating ourselves up and going into a shame cycle of, I shouldn't have reacted angrily. Because Victoria, listening to what he said to you, I think it is perfectly normal for you to be angry. So let's not diminish that. Anger is an important emotion here, because it's telling you that something's wrong, and it's allowed you to do this trigger and to go into, oh, I see transference here. So the anger, we don't want to remove it because it's really important. Maybe want to dial down the volume of it, but I think most importantly is we deal with it. Once we've had our anger, then we have mechanisms in place to, once we settle down and have our breath work, we can go back and repair that rupture. Okay, I would take myself off to the bedroom. I have a nice space there by the window. I could listen to relaxing music or a guided meditation to get me back into a level headspace. I would then talk to Juan about his comments and how it made me feel. Okay, this is amazing, right? But again, I want it more solid. I want the nice space by the window, listen to relaxing music, guided meditation, right? I want that to be, we're not even thinking about it. This is what we do when we get triggered, right? And then talk to Juan. I love that. So she's realizing that if she talks to Juan in his hyper-aroused state, when he's also in a hyper-aroused state, it's going to lead to more conflict. And she's going to want to drink more. And certainly they're going to be disconnected more, right? So that's really super important, okay? That she's recognizing that I need to get away and get my shit together before I can go back and talk to him. And even then, I would go back and I would say, David, do you feel ready, emotionally ready to talk about this? Like, I think this is something I would want to talk about before we go out, but I want to make sure, are you okay? Are you in a good state to do that? Because if you're not, we can leave it until you are. But I've just gone away and I've had a meditation. I feel okay to talk about it. Like, even that conversation, inviting him into the conversation, because he might feel like you're bombarding him if you just start talking to him and about this situation. And I'll explain why in a minute, why he'll feel bombarded, okay? And then about his comments and how it made me feel, how we have that conversation is really important. So it's when you said that you didn't want to go, and then you said you did, but you was going to put that money on the credit card, I felt XYZ, right? So like the way you put it out there, so you're not saying to him, your comments are responsible for my behaviors. You're saying, I just want you to know how I felt when this happened, right? I love you dearly, and it's really important that we understand what's going on with the feelings here. And she says, we spoke about it today, and he was surprised and a bit hurt that I thought of him in that way in the moment. And I have to remember that he's not my ex. Okay? So I just want to delve a little bit deeper into what could I do differently to give a greater understanding of the situation and to help Victoria a little bit more. Okay? So what I'm going to talk about right now is from this book, How to Improve Your Marriage Without Talking About It, by Patricia Love and Stephen Stosny. Okay, excellent book. Okay, and what they talk about in this book is conflict, and this is a form of conflict. It comes down to a battle between shame and fear. Okay, and if we just talk for a moment, just for sake of simplicity, of a typical heterosexual relationship of a man and a woman, because that's how it's described in the book. What tends to happen is the woman will be the person who will be feeling the fear, and the man will be feeling the shame. Okay, so the female in the relationship, in a conflict situation, they fear disconnection and distance. They want to be close. They don't want to be disconnected or distant, and that creates anxiety. Okay, that anxiety through something called emotional attunement. So emotional attunement is when, a few days ago, I walked downstairs after I woke up. I saw Liza and I'm like, how are you doing? And she's like, yeah, okay. And I can tell without her saying anything that she's in a bad mood. That is emotional attunement. So we are in tune with how people are feeling without them saying anything. Okay, so what the authors are saying in this book is, if a woman is feeling anxious and afraid about something, and she's not telling the guy will pick up on it, and it will trigger thoughts of failing, inadequacy, and shame. He will take out on board. When he sees that you are in a mood, or he feels you're in a mood, he will own that and feel ashamed of that in some way. And then when you pick up that he's feeling ashamed, likely because he's stonewalling, gone quiet, or he's angry, that triggers more anxiety in you. So there's always this kind of tit for tat between shame and fear. Now, why do men feel shame? The reason men are feeling shame is because of status. Men are still raised to not be in touch with their feelings, to not cry, to not be a feeling person, to just deal with shit. And there's also this status hierarchy that affects everybody, but males in particular, of how effective they are as a father compared to other fathers, how effective they are as a husband compared to other husbands. So a good example would be continually comparing yourself to exes of your partners in a status way. God, I wonder if he was better in bed with me. I wonder if his knob was bigger than mine. I wonder if he had bigger muscles than me. I wonder if he gave her oral better than me. I wonder if he showed up for her better than me. All this kind of stuff, right? It's all about status, because the man wants to feel secure that he knows what he's doing. And the more secure he is knowing what he's doing, and the more routine he has in his life that doesn't involve hyperarousal. So a man doesn't like hyperarousal. So if you go to a man, you fucking start shouting and screaming at him, he can't handle it. He's just gonna fucking shut down, or he's gonna fucking explode. He can't handle hyperarousal states as well as women can, right? So, this is kind of what goes on for men. The other thing about routine and men in relation to like shame is men feel more secure and happy when they're at home. Okay, and they feel happy and secure when they're at home and their wives are there as well. But here's the thing that they say in this book that is really important. They don't need to be doing anything with their wives. In fact, most of them wouldn't want to do anything with them. Bear with me on this. So it could be a case that the guy is in one room playing on his Xbox, his wife is in the other room watching telly, and they've been like that for hours, and then the woman gets up and says she's going out, and the guy's like, well, where are you going? Why are you leaving me? We don't say why you're leaving me. Why are you going? He's worried that she's leaving him. And she'll turn around and say, well, you're not even doing anything with me. Because she believes that connection and doing things together equals love, connection, intimacy, and all that kind of stuff. The guy just feels she's here. She's here. And that's all I need, right? He doesn't need to be touching and feeling and massaging and talking as long as you're here. And this is why divorce, according to this couple, divorce is more difficult for a man, because what men do is they make the women in their lives their meaning and purpose. So they need their wives around them all the time. Because if they're not, it starts to break up their routine, and they start to feel inadequate. They start to feel insecure and inadequate, right? And that leads to shame and a loss of status. Now, I know because Victoria told me that in her previous relationship, when her partner worked away for long periods of time, he would always want to know what she's doing, what she's up to, checking in on her, right? Now, the reason I'm pointing to this is this word control. So what the authors are saying in this book is that this longing of men for the stability of a wife's presence can be mistaken for control. Like, it's not that they want to control you. It's just their biology, the way that men operate, is they want you to be around. And when you're not around, they feel inadequate and the fear that you're going to leave them. So that's why it feels like control. Where are you? What are you doing? Why are you going someplace, right? And in most cases, because men don't even know this is going on, and they don't like hyperarousal, so they don't want to get into conversations about these things anyway, they're just going to bottle it up. And the way that it comes out is going to be with anger and frustration, or stonewalling and silence, which is going to breed more disconnection, because it's going to create more anxiety in you, which is going to create more anger and frustration with you, and more anxiousness with you, and that's going to create more shame on him. See how this cycle works out, right? So in the case of Victoria's ex, who isn't even in home, think about this. If we're at home and we want our wives at home with us, or our partners at home with us, because they're our whole entire meaning, and we need to make sure they're there to make us feel comfortable and safe and secure. What happens when you're working away? Now you like, it's 10x. Your intensity and feeling is 10x. You really want to make sure you know what they're doing, because you're not even there to see them. And you're feeling so much more vulnerable and so much more afraid and so much more terrified, right? In the Strive method for addictions, in the thought phase, we talk about vulnerability. And we focus a lot on Brené Brown's work in Daring Greatly. And Brené Brown says that there are 3 shields that protect you against being vulnerable. And because you're not vulnerable, shame will continue to breed. So vulnerability is a shame killer. If you cannot be vulnerable in your relationships, then shame will become really toxic. All right? And these 3 shields that protect you against being vulnerable are foreboding joy, numbing, which is drinking alcohol, and in this case, like what prevented Victoria for being vulnerable was numbing. She drank alcohol. And the other one is perfectionism. Okay. In this instance with David, and I'm going to have to assume this because he's not here and he's not part of the conversation, it's likely we can't include him. I'm going to have to assume that there is an extreme lack of vulnerability on his part here, and it showed up as foreboding joy. Foreboding joy. So, a joyful moment presented itself to go out to this wonderful restaurant with my beautiful, beautiful girlfriend, who looks beautiful, by the way, and we're going to go out with her sister and her husband, who I like or I don't like, whatever. If he doesn't like them, then this really plays an important role, Victoria, if you're thinking about it. But if he does like him as well, then it's going to be a joyful experience. But instead of leaning into the vulnerability of a joyful experience and just going, oh, I'm going to have a really good time tonight, which is really difficult for some people, he forebodes the joy. He says to himself, I can't afford this. This is too expensive. I'm going to have to put it on my credit card and I'll never be able to pay it off. Right? He's blocking himself from the joyful experience of experiencing joy. He doesn't want to go there in a vulnerable sense. So he forebodes that joy. He makes it more of a pessimistic opportunity than an optimistic opportunity. And that foreboding of joy, coupled with his desire to want to stay at home and not go anywhere, and for his girlfriend to stay at home with him, but he's never going to say that, spews out as, well, I've just looked at the menu and I can't afford it. Right? I can't afford it and I can't go to this place. And there'll be something in the relationship around money here, Victoria. There'll be something here around money. I don't know if you have more money than him. I don't know if he's aware of that, but there'll be something here around money where he's obviously using that insecurity as a way to forebode joy. And I invite you to reflect, does this come up quite a lot? In terms of you get ready to do something that's going to be joyful and exciting, and this impacts him in some way. Right? I invite you to just have a think about that. I know for a fact that in my relationship with Liza pointed out to me many times that whenever we was on the eve of a celebratory event like Christmas, Thanksgiving, a birthday celebration, or hers or Zia's or Jude's, whenever we were about to do something, going to Burning Man or going on vacation, we would always fight. And she said, isn't it interesting that this is happening? It was related to my foreboding of joy. Take Burning Man as an example. So when Liza thinks of going to Burning Man, she's like super excited. She's super joyful. She can't wait to get the tickets. She can't wait to book the RV. She can't wait to deck the RV out. She can't wait to get all the material, to cut it all up and to do all the costumes. She can't wait to get out there into the sand, to get dirty, to get naked, to have a good laugh, right? It's a 100% utterly joyful experience for her. Burning Man for me is like sliding down a razor blade using my balls as bricks, right? I'm thinking to myself, I don't know how to drive an RV. I'm going to crash the RV. I don't want to dress up in stupid clothing. I don't want to be talking to someone and they've got a clitoris in front of me naked. I don't know because I've never been there before. I don't want sand in my face all the time. What am I going to do if I get lost? What am I going to do if everyone's drinking and taking drugs around me? Like, can you see what's happening there? Liza is in full vulnerability of this joyful experience, which contains, this isn't going to be easy, but I'm going to make this a joyful experience. I am not willing to be vulnerable enough to go there. For me, I have to forebode that joy, and I have to think that everything is going to go wrong before we eventually get there. Guess what happens? I get that I have a wonderful experience. Okay? But if I was to go to Burning Man next year, I would have to be super present about not foreboding the joy. I would have to go into myself. I'd have to meditate. I'd have to breathe. I'd have to be still. And I'd have to be saying, Lee, you know you forebode joy when this shit happens. Okay? Are you approve of yourself? Do you feel secure going to Burning Man? Do you feel in control? Are you okay? You got this, boy? Like, I would have to do that. But that is an instance of me where I don't want to leave the house. I have a lot of clients who are men who have lots of fights with their wives because they don't want to leave the fucking house. They don't want to. They're comfortable just being in the home, playing on their laptop, watching TV, and never leaving the home because they're afraid. They're not willing to be vulnerable enough to meet other people, to interact with other people, to go to places they've never been before. That is a man thing. And yeah, there'll be men out there that fucking are yellow personality types who like jumping off buildings and all this type of stuff. But in this book, they talk very sensibly to me that this is a male trait. Okay? So, it's not always a control issue. We think they're trying to control us, but they're just acting normally and in a perverse way. It's because they fucking love you so much. It's because you are the absolutely epicenter of their life. And they're afraid that they're going to lose you. But it can bleed out into massive amounts of controlling if we're not careful. And what happens here is fear and shame in a relationship produces the death effect. Now, the death effect is a module that we cover in the stuck form of stride method for addictions and relationships. The death effect is when you just are completely blissfully unaware of what the fuck is going on. You are in the matrix. So for 35 years, when I was drinking alcohol, I was in the matrix. You could have You could have had a clone of me right now. This person right now could have gone back in time, sat me down when I was 31, 32, and said to me, Lee, alcoholism is an invisible, violent, and dominant belief system, and you shouldn't be drinking alcohol. And I would be like, yeah, fucking get that completely. I get it, yeah. It is an invisible, violent, dominant belief system. Yet there is no value in alcohol. And then I go straight to the pub and fucking get pissed. Hey, Glenn, it's nice to see you here. That is the death effect. And it's really important to understand it so you can break it and beat it. The death effect happens in relationships when fear and shame comes up. So in this instance, Victoria doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't know that her anxiety and her stress is going to be transferred to him and to create shame or activate his shame. And David has no idea that his shame is being activated by anxiety, either Victoria's or his own, right? They don't know that the shame, anxiety balance is going on, the death effect. So we really need to understand what is going on. How do we do that? We raise awareness like now. We learn relational literacy. So in this instance, Victoria will watch his video, which allows her to sit down with David and talk a little bit openly about this. She could even say to David, watch this video with me. Actually, I will suggest to Victoria that they watch this video together. Okay? Because here's the thing. We need to be focusing on the us-ness of our relationship. We need to learn to be allies. So if we learn to be allies, then the women in a relationship with men, they need to identify what triggers a man's shame. They need to identify that. I'll give you an example. This morning, I went downstairs and I have my routine of how I'm going to look at the Zia in the morning. I have my routine. It flies. I know what I'm doing. Okay? But my routine doesn't match Liza's expectations of my routine. So she has an expectation that I'm going to do X, Y, Z in the morning with Zia that fits into her ideal of what a good parent is. I have my routine that doesn't match her expectation. Now, when Liza comes downstairs and doesn't tell me that I'm not living up to her expectation, but she intervenes and she starts acting in a very passive-aggressive way. So she starts taking over and she starts dropping little innuendos. That is because she's anxious that I'm not taking care of Zia in the way that she wants. Now, when she gets anxious and she's dropping these innuendos, and I've got this emotional attunement going on because I love her and I live with her and I'm tuned into that with her, I am then going, fuck, she's anxious. But I'm not thinking she's anxious, I need to give her empathy. I'm thinking she's anxious, and now, boom, it's activating my shame. Actually, that's not true. I'm not thinking she's anxious. I'm listening to her feedback. I'm feeling her emotional attunement, and it's triggering shame in me. I am not a good enough father again. So how do I deal with that? How does my shame? Well, I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not a stonewaller. I shout. So I shouted at her. And when I shouted at her, that got her even more anxious because Zia's in the room. So then she deals with me shouting at her. How do you think Liza deals with me shouting at her? She shouts back. And then she gets condescending. And then she gets sarcastic. And do you know what I then do? Then I stonewall. Then I get quiet. Then when I'm stonewalling and quiet, Liza gets more condescending and more sarcastic, trying to drag me in. And then I get more angry, so I got to get the fuck out of the way, right? That was our rupture this morning. The way we got around it was we both are in the space of repair. So Liza broke the ground, tried to talk to me. I said, I don't want to talk to you. And then after a while, she said, Lee, look. And her body language and her tone was so different. She started off like this. Lee, regarding this morning. And I knew from that tone that she was going to own her shit. She did. Okay? And that allows me to say thank you. Can I have space to tell you what went on for me earlier this morning? And I said, you don't think I have a routine? I think I have a routine. But if you want this routine to change, please communicate it with me so it doesn't trigger my shame. Because I want you to know that when you interfere and you give off innuendo and you have this emotional thing going on of this guy is not doing what I tell him and he's not living up to my expectations, but I'm not going to tell him. I'm just going to give him that vibe. So hopefully you'll get it. That triggers shaming me. So now I told her that triggers shaming me. I have a lot of triggers around shame, around being a father and a husband. Liza, please recognize them. And your role in our relationship is to do everything you can to remove those mines so I don't fucking step on them. That's you taking care of your side of the net. My job of taking care of my side of the net in this usness is for me to recognize when you're anxious and to not trigger shame. So when I pick up emotionally in tune with you, like I was this morning, it wasn't even emotional attunement. She sat down with Zia and actually started doing stuff with her in terms of schoolwork at 8:30 in the morning. I knew in that moment that she was saying, Lee, stop fucking about and come and do this with your daughter because it's your time. This is bleeding into my free time. Right? I need to be more aware of that. Why is she doing that? She's doing that because she's anxious. She's anxious that I'm not doing it. And then in that moment, I could say, hey, Liz, what's going on for you? Right? What's going on for you? Or know that if I don't do the routine with Zia that fits into her ideal of what the routine is, it's going to trigger anxiety. So, does it really matter to me what routine I do with Zia in the morning? No, it doesn't, as long as I have a routine, because I'm a man. That's why very often I'll say to Liza, look, I just don't give a fuck. Just write it down in order what you want me to do and I'll fucking do it. Right? I just want a routine. I don't multitask. I focus on one thing. My job from 8:30 in the morning till 10:30 is to look at the Zia. Okay, what do you want me to do in that space that conforms to looking after Zia? Give me the fucking list and I'll do it. And if I do that list, I feel happy because I need routine as a man, and Liza's happy because she doesn't have the anxiety that I'm not doing what she wants me to do. And this isn't about control. She's not trying to control me by wanting me to do XYZ and having expectations. She wants our daughter to have a good, wonderful, educational, enjoyable, structured homeschooling routine. So this is all about love for our daughter. So if we can come back and find the intention in this, okay? So Victoria, what is the intention in his outburst here? Then we can have some empathy and we can come together as allies, okay? How does Victoria feel after when she wrote the trigger? To be honest, emotionally exhausted. It took all my mental energy to get through the day. I just wanted to curl up in bed. I've also spent time today reflecting on the trigger and how I can still get this self-destructive feeling. It rarely happens these days, but it's obviously still there. But I'm also feeling very hopeful because it's the first time I've owned my action. I've taken responsibility for it. I'm not blaming anyone else, which again was something I did in the past. I can't control the situation around me, but I can control how I react to it. Beautiful. Well, please think about this. All of you people out there that think that drinking alcohol in this situation to numb your emotions is a good thing. Look, to be honest, emotionally exhausted. The day after, she can't even get out of bed. Yet if in that moment she had the knowledge, the understanding, the relational literacy, and more of a toolkit and more of an understanding about her addiction, in that moment, and she would have dealt with it, looking at alcohol through a long-term lens of value and said, this isn't going to help me. This is not going to help me at all. Right? What really needs to happen here is we need to get our shit sorted before we go out. So we can go out on understanding what's going on. So the unsaid becomes said. All right? If she would have done that, then Victoria, you know this, the next day you wouldn't have had to curl up into bed. Okay? Because you would have been connected. You would have brought yourself together. Woo! Whoa! I hope that was helpful, folks. I really do. We will record this and drop it all over social media so you could take a look at it. I will be back next week at the same time to do a different trigger. If you want me to go through yours, then, you know, come and join our private Facebook group if you haven't already, and send me a message on Facebook and I will do a trigger of yours. All right? So I'm always open to that. Glynis Tams, thanks for commenting here, and everybody else who joined me live today. Have a wonderful alcohol-free day. I'll see you next week. Cheers.